As a fashion marketing teacher for 14 years and in a fashion magnet program where we had to interview our students in order for them to enter into the program, one of the many questions we would ask them is, why are you interested in fashion? And inevitably, 99% of them said because they want to be a fashion designer. And another question that we asked them was, well, what do you want to learn over the 4 years that you're in the program? What do you want to walk away from this program knowing? And of course, they wanted to know how to make clothing and have their own fashion design business. Well, as the marketing teacher, I grew to understand that the students had a limited knowledge of the fashion industry. So in this episode, I am going to go over the 4 levels of the fashion industry and the job opportunities that are there for the students beyond fashion design. So let's talk about it. You're listening to Marketing Adventure, the hub for business, fashion, marketing, and other CTE educators who integrate marketing into the learning experience. I'm your host, Jackie Walker. Each week, I'll cover marketing education concepts, strategies, tips, trends, frameworks, and other information to equip you to connect your classroom to digital natives while cultivating an engaged learning environment. So come on into the room where your favorite beverage, snacks, and even your cell phone are all welcome. So as you can imagine, over the years, I understand fashion design. As a matter of fact, my major in college was fashion design and my minor was business. So I too, as a teenager, wanted to be a fashion designer with my own business, running my own store. So I totally 100% understand the perspective of these students. I identify, but of course, over the decades of being an adult, I came to understand that there was so much more to the fashion industry. And especially when I started teaching fashion marketing, I was able to really see the full industry and also help students open up their eyes to beyond the sewing machine, beyond designing something, and understand what was really out there in the fashion industry, and that there are 4 levels to this. And there's a level prior to being a designer and 2 levels after being a designer. So I'm going to go over the 4 levels of the fashion industry. So I'm going to talk to you today about the 4 levels, which are primary, secondary, retail, and auxiliary. So let's get into these levels. As the kids say, there's levels to this. There are levels to this. The first level of the fashion industry is the primary level. And we all know primary means first, number one. So there is something that has to happen prior to a fashion designer making clothing, right? That material has to come from somewhere. And that material comes from the primary level of the fashion industry. That level includes formers and laboratories. If you understand fabric and textiles and fiber, you understand that we have our natural fibers and we have our synthetic fibers, those manufactured fibers. Well, the natural fibers come from farmers who create cotton, wool, linen. So those are our natural fibers. Then you have your synthetic fibers. You have nylon, you have polyester, and so much more that has been created over the decades of the industry, textile industry. So you have jobs at the farm, you have jobs at the laboratory, that students who are interested in fashion industry could potentially be a part of. They could be a part of creating the fiber that the fabric is made from. And, getting into that entry level of the industry. I once had a student whose dad insisted that she major in pharmaceuticals, go to pharmacy school and become a pharmacist. And she ultimately did that. I'm so proud of her. So she has her doctorate and even married a man who's in the same industry, has the doctorates as well. They are a power couple. However, she had such a passion for fashion. And she would tell me all the time, Miss Walker, I'm going to open up my pharmacy and I'm going to have a boutique attached to it. I'm going to be the first pharmacy with a boutique because she just loved fashion so much. And she really wanted to know what she could do in fashion using a degree in science, because that was her bachelor's degree was in science. And so I told her, I said, well, there is science involved in creating fiber, the manufactured fiber, because those go through like companies that create that look at fiber and learn how fiber can increase performance, learn how fiber can be made lighter or more durable. I said that all involves science. And you're talking about fiber, which leads to fabric, which leads to fashion. And so she thought about that, looked into it, but I suppose because there's just not a lot out there that talks about that industry. And the kids look at the bottom line. They want to know how much money would this job pay? Because that was one of the questions that she asked. I was like, I have no idea. This is not an industry that I have actually the other part of the industry that I've actually researched. But, I did encourage her to look into that. So there are jobs, there are engineers, there are scientists, there are people working out at forums, doing all sorts of things that's at that primary level of the fashion industry. So at that level, they're making yarns, they're making fibers, you're dealing with converters to convert the manufactured fibers. You're dealing with gray goods, which is the basic essential textile that's made out of the untreated fibers that generally are sent off to a manufacturer for them to then do what they want with with those goods to essentially make the clothing that would eventually be made from those. So those are things that you have at the primary level. And keep in mind, because this is the primary level of the industry, that this portion of the industry usually has to work about 2 years ahead of the industry, because they are the very beginning of the chain. So they're working and innovating and coming up with things years prior to any designer, any manufacturer getting their hands on any of the fabrics. And another thing to think about is that many of the jobs at the primary level come from overseas, maybe in third world areas where a lot of that production comes from. So many times, if you're working at the primary level, you could actually travel overseas or be stationed overseas to manage or do whatever the job is that you're doing, that particular factory or business that is creating the primary goods. Now, the secondary level of the industry is where a lot of the students want to be. This is where the designers and the manufacturers are. These are the people who receive those primary goods, and then they, in turn, use those goods to create fashion, to create products. So at this level, not only do you have the designers and the manufacturers, but you also have wholesalers at this particular level, as well as, vendors who are selling or promoting the goods before they're even used to create a product, a fashion item. So you have a lot of parts at this particular level of the industry. So even within the primary, even within the secondary level, you have designers who will interact with other vendors, wholesalers, or providers within the secondary level. So these people can work vertically and they work horizontally with the other levels. So the type of jobs that you could find at the secondary level would be someone who's an independent designer, or they could be a designer for a company like one of the department stores, say JCPenney, and all those who carry a private label. They could be a designer for a manufacturer. And a lot of times they are either designing a line for the manufacturer under various names, or they could be creating knockoffs from the fashion weeks that they've seen in various high level designers. So you have designers that can work in various ways within the secondary level. Then you have your manufacturers. Those manufacturers could just manufacture several different lines for various companies and individual designers, or they could be a manufacturer for a particular company and they only manufacture goods for that particular company. So within the manufacturing area, you have people who are fabric cutters, you have seamstress, you have people who deal with various things that has to do with creating your garments. Because if you think about what it takes to create a garment, first of all, you have to cut the fabric, you have to make the patterns. So they have pattern makers, you have fabric cutters, like I said before. Then they have to go through the seamstress, and then they have to go through, it could be that there's some coloring that needs to be done. There are so many jobs that are your daily worker jobs. Then you have management. You have to have someone who supervises those areas. You have to have people, creative teams that come up with the designs or the lines or the, watch the trends. So you have to have your fashion trends person. You have to have so many different people in that manufacturer company that has to have their hand and pulse on the fashion industry in order to do the production that comes about with the fashion at the secondary level. And you also have machinists, and you have so many different things, so many jobs that can be done at the secondary level. And then, as I mentioned before, you have wholesalers. So you have people who work for textile companies or fabric companies or fiber companies, I mean to say, that are promoting to those secondary manufacturers, designers. You have wholesalers that are not only working um, vertically, but they also are working horizontally to then take the things from the manufacturer or designer and sell them to the retailer, to the third level, which is either you can call it tertiary level or you can call it the retail level, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So there are so many opportunities within the secondary level of the industry. And as I stated, students tend to focus on being a designer, which is in that secondary level, and or they could focus a little bit on the retail aspect once that dream of being a designer has gone away. So that is your secondary level. Now, a lot of the jobs that have to do with manufacturers are overseas. However, we've had a push in the United States to have goods that are made in the USA. So you'll find manufacturers here in the USA as well. Pricing tends to be a little bit higher on those goods that are made in the United States because the labor rates are higher. But you'll see a lot of things coming from China, coming from um, the Far East, Caribbean, South America, various areas where the labor is less expensive. And there are some documentaries on labor for fashion and how it may not be that bright and shiny and wonderful place that, you know, tend to not think about when it comes to fashion, but fashion does have a little dirty side, and that tends to be in the manufacturing of the goods. So there are a lot of documentaries out there that talk about it, but um, most of the goods that are made for fashion are made overseas, and there are a lot fewer USA manufacturers of goods. As far as lead time for the secondary level, they tend to work 6 months to a year and a half in advance, because just depending on, you know, if it's a small independent designer or if it's a bigger company where they have to mass produce a lot of things. So that lead time, again, is just 6 months to a year and a half. Hey, adventurous educator. I just want to take a quick break to ask, is this your first time teaching fashion marketing, or do you need a boost in your curriculum? Well, look no further. I have the Ultimate Fashion Marketing Class Bundle. It's packed with 4 vibrant presentations, fun and engaging activities, quizzes, and 4 major projects for an immersive semester of fashion exploration. And it comes with the pacing guide for an 18-week semester. Additionally, each assignment has detailed student instructions and suggested pacing times so that you can tailor the time frame to fit your teaching schedule. For more information about this must-have bundle, go to marketingadventure.com and search Ultimate Fashion Marketing Class Bundle, or simply click the link in the show notes. Now back to the show. The third level is the retail level, and you can also call it the tertiary level, but a lot of people recognize it as the retail level. Now, at this level, we are talking about stores that are open to consumers, and they come in a wide variety of categories, just like your regular store, your boutique store, your department store, your category killers, you know. So I'll actually do an episode that talks about the variety of retail stores. But so just know that this level of the industry is where consumers have access to the merchandise. Retail stores are created for individuals like me and you to walk into, shop for what we need. They buy from the secondary levels. As I mentioned before, wholesalers are at the secondary level. And so they obtain their goods from the secondary level at discounted prices. So they can then turn around and mark it up and sell it to the end user, the consumer. At this level, there are so many jobs. Of course, we know there's a salesperson, there's a manager, there's management teams, you have your regional managers that manage several stores, you have your VPs over various areas like marketing, consumers, all these different areas in retail. So you have people who are visual merchandisers at this level, which in my program, that is the certificate that the students obtained, was a visual merchandising assistant certificate, because once they completed all their coursework, they were able to go and work in a store and merchandise the apparel or the accessories. And the retailers loved when my students fill out their applications and they told them they were in a fashion marketing program, that they were getting their certificate from the local college, and that they were a participant in DECA, and they'd done so much, they immediately signed them up. I had so many of my girls that worked in retail while they were in school, while they were in college, and they've gone on to corporate jobs to work for as e-commerce merchandisers or management or what have you. They've gone on to do a lot of different things. And so at the retail level, you can, like I said, sales, management, visual merchandising. There are so many things that you can do in a corporate environment that, say for like Skechers and JC Penney's, they have corporate offices that feed into the retail stores, of course, developing the planograms, doing so many different things at that level. So again, I want to tell you about all the different types of retailers that are out there. So I think my next episode will be about retail. Now, at the retail level, the lead time is generally like 3 to 6 months. So, companies say like JCPenney, they have a buyer that go out to the market and they actually select the merchandise months in advance to have it shipped to all of their different stores to be ready on the rack at a particular time that would be the most optimal sales time for the merchandise. And that's generally 3 to 6 months in advance. The fourth and final level of the fashion industry is the auxiliary level. Now, many people don't even think about a lot of these as being fashion specific, of course, because some of these can be used in various industries. However, for the fourth level auxiliary, this is the level of the industry that can work with any of the other three levels. Like any of those other three levels need the auxiliary because this is where you have your trade associations, you have your magazines, you have your newspapers, advertising is done at this level, you have buyers and merchandising at this level, you have specialists and consultants at this level, and every level of the industry needs to have these particular types of jobs because those individuals interact with the other levels to promote, let's say, primary goods to the secondary level. And then those people who are working in those jobs promote from secondary to the third level retail. So, for instance, there are trade magazines in which um, fiber companies who are trying to promote their fibers um, use those trade magazines to send out to the manufacturers and the designers because they want them to know about their fibers, about their goods that are produced at the primary level. You have your associations that are at the primary level because they're working to help promote those fibers. You have fashion forecasters that are at the auxiliary level because at every level you need someone, like I said, there's lead time. You need someone who is forecasting what's coming down the pipe. So you'll have fashion forecasters at every level of the industry so that they can be on trend and help move the goods that are being produced. You have advertising agencies at this level because they have to advertise. It doesn't just happen that a manufacturer finds out about a newly created manufactured fiber. That has to be advertised. It has to be made known. And there's competitors out there in the industry that are creating these various fibers that are in competition with one another. So you're going to have advertising. One has to talk about how theirs is better or what have you. So you have advertising that goes on at every level of the industry. It's not just restricted to one particular level. You have research agencies that do the research for every single level of the industry. So all of these things are happening that aren't specific to a particular level. They are continuous processes and development that go on at every single level of the industry. Now, we're not going to say that one particular company works at every level or interacts with every level of the industry, but they may have their niche. You may have, as far as like a magazine, there's not going to be one magazine that's going to market to every level of the industry. You're going to have your primary goods magazines that market to the secondary level. You're going to have your secondary level magazines that market to the retail level because they want them to know about their products. So, and then you have just your regular magazines that are marketing to consumers, like your Vogues and your Elle magazines. Those are magazines that are being marketed to the end user. They're not marketing to a manufacturer, and they're not marketing to the primary levels. So you can look at the auxiliary level of the industry being comprised of support services that work continuously to keep the consumer and the various levels informed of what's happening in the fashion industry. We've covered 4 levels of the fashion industry, and just to go back over those, the first level is primary. This is where you're dealing with your fibers, the production of your fibers, and your gray goods, and converting fibers that are manufactured and all of that. And they sell to the secondary level. The secondary level is made up of designers, manufacturers, wholesalers, consultants, vendors, and they can work. You'll have designers and manufacturers that are working with wholesalers so that those people can then in turn sell to the retail level, which is the third level, the tertiary level. And retailers, of course, are selling to the end user, the consumer. Now you have the auxiliary level, which is your fourth and final level, and they are support services. So they work continuously or simultaneously with primary, secondary, and retail levels to make sure that the consumers know about the fashion industry and what's happening, what's on trend, and all of those good things. So those are your 4 levels of the fashion industry. I really hope that you found this episode valuable today. And I do want to thank you for joining me at Marketing Adventure with Jackie. And I hope that you have a wonderfully blessed day. Thanks for listening to Marketing Adventure. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode with someone you think would benefit from the information shared here today. If you have any questions or want to connect with me, find me on Instagram at Marketing Adventure. All links and resources discussed in this episode can be found in the show notes at marketingadventure.com.